Hello everyone, welcome again to another series of video from Electronics Eternity. This time around will be looking at port forwarding, right? So as I'm doing more videos on ESP32 and Internet of Things, I feel port forwarding will become another important feature that we need to learn so that we can incorporate into our projects and finally make use of it, right? So first of all, what is port forwarding? So port forwarding is a feature used to allow remote servers and devices on the internet to be able to access devices that are on a private network, right? So the term here, private network, is basically referring to our local network that we have. Most of the time, it's the our local Wi-Fi connection that we have. That's basically private, right? No one externally could access your devices through your local private network or your private Wi-Fi, right? So when we allow port forwarding, so we basically allow anyone on the internet to be able to access our private network, and we do it for a reason. For example, if you want to take information from our database or server or whatever information that is needed on a web page or something, right? So we do it with the reason. Now don't be alarmed with the concept of any devices on the internet will be able to access that device. Reason being is, first of all, for someone to access your own port forwarding, they need to know your IP address, and secondly, you could sorry so on the first point, like someone needs to know your IP address, and that is quite unlikely unless you have shared it to them. And the secondly, you could also restrict which device that could access your local port forwarding, right? For example, you could configure a specific IP address or a MAC address, and that's how port forwarding can be done more securely, right? So that's basically about what is port forwarding and how we can use it. Now let's look at some examples that we have in like some routers on how do we configure that. So let's go on to the next slide. So this is a D-Link router, right? So if you happen to have the same model, then you can pretty much use the same concept. If not, most of the time the port forwarding features is just the same, right? So I have named this ESP32, right? So every port forwarding template, you can give a name to it, right? You could also enable or disable it depending on your needs. So whenever you're not using it, just to be safe, you could disable it, right? So the protocol is always TCP or TCP plus UDP or UDP, right? So TCP works best for me for all the time, so I use it TCP. I really don't think there's much difference if you use TCP plus UDP as well, right? Now next is one host start IP address and end address. So you use this when you basically have how do I say this? You basically have a set of device that you want to allow for connection, right? So maybe that could range from 192.168.0 to 1 until 10, right? So you can give this when you have a collection of device that you want to connect to it, right? So this is basically Ethernet connection. Internet, the start port is always 80, end port is always 80, because I think in order to allow World Wide Web, you need to set this to 80 and 80, right? Enable MAC mapping, I'll show it in the next slide. So LAN host IP address. So basically what this means is when I connect to a particular router, right? So your main IP is attained through your router. This is not your main IP, right? This is an IP that is automatically configured by the router for all the local devices that is connected to a router, right? So it assigns those values just to differentiate them, but this does not mean that this is your main IP. Your main IP is basically your router's IP. So if you want to know what's your IP, you gotta go check your router's IP. So probably if you go to status, you can find that, right? So, but what does this 192.168.0.5 refers to? So this refers to the destination of the port forwarding. So that means if you are somewhere else outside of your home or something, and you want to connect to your port forwarding, it will reach finally to this particular IP, right? So there is it won't go to any other IP and etc. Right? So let's just say, for example, you have a mobile device outside and you want to connect to a local to a web server which is locally hosted. So you need to tell where the web server is hosted. For example, you could have 10 devices connected to your home Wi-Fi. So which one is it? So how do you tell which one is? By putting this IP address, which will point to a particular device, not all of them, right? So virtual host port, we maintain it at 80. Now, so I hope like this like basically tells you what that means. Now let's go to the next slide. So if you enable MAC mapping, it will basically give you an option to fill in the MAC address. I believe like this would be more secure because the MAC address does not change as often as IP address, right? So you can put MAC address if you want, and it will be more secure, and it will also prevent like someone else to hack into your connection. Though it's quite unlikely, but this is more secure, so it's available for you to use that, right? So that is MAC address for you over there. Let's go on to the next slide. So the next slide, this is basically another router page where we have the port forwarding option as well. This is a like interface of a Huawei Wi-Fi router. So I'm just sharing this to you so that you know how it looks like, so again, this type is user defined, and probably you can select this as TCP or UDP as well in the application, and then you can enable it and disable it whenever you want. And this is just the name, the random name that I gave. Button state one name, I just used the default, I did not change any of that. Internal host, like I clarified earlier, where is the server being locally hosted? So you could have 10 devices locally connected to your Wi-Fi. So when you say this, it will go to this particular device which has this IP. So it could be a computer, and accordingly my router recognizes the computer name, so it gives that computer name right here, right next to it. So this is where you locally host your web server or your database or whatever, right? So you have to give this IP. However, when you're externally communicating to this particular device, you need to set the target destination as your router IP address, right? So external source IP address. So this is an IP address. This IP address is basically the IP address of my ESP32, right? So it can be anything. As you can see, both of the values the same. That means it would only allow one single device, right? So that's the reason why I've set the same value. However, if you have a collection of device, then you could put like 48, and over here it could be 50, and you can allow like 3 devices. So protocol is TCP, external port number 8080, because you want to allow World Wide Web access. The same applies over here, right? So on the next one is DHCP static IP. So you can give static IP to your devices. For example, if you have a local Wi-Fi at home and you want IP address for your ESP32 or whatever phone devices or whatever devices to be static. So every single time you connect to that Wi-Fi, you will have a static IP, which basically helps with this connection, because you could see that you have like specified the external source IP address. So this particular feature over here, it allows you to like preset that configuration so that it doesn't change every single time you connect to the Wi-Fi. So you can just click new, and then you can insert the MAC address and the IP address. It would then assign these values every single time the same devices connect to the same Wi-Fi again. Right, again, this is an added I would say this is an added a control feature. So you could You could assign this as well for better security, I suppose. So you can do that, and it can also make your code and processing or your configuration over here work every single time, because if the IP address changes every single time, then you're gonna have to configure it again and again. So that adds up to the work that you're doing, right? So this feature comes in handy if you want to have a like static IP, as the name suggests, static IP configuration. If you have that static IP, it would like help in many ways when it comes to configuration, and also it can act as an added layer of security, I suppose, right? So I think we have come to the end of the video, right? So I hope that you get some idea about how port forwarding works, and as we have gone through a few router sample on how to set port forwarding, I hope it gives you an idea on how to do that. So I hope you find this video beneficial. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comment. I'll try my best to help and advise. So thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Until the next video, bye bye.